What does the older generation not understand about today's job market? It's much more competitive and much less rewarding. You don't owe the company you work for with extra unpaid hours or your loyalty and submissiveness, since you aren't rewarded for that anymore. At least certainly not like they used to. Loyalty isn't the name of the game anymore, flexibility is. You get a better opportunity at another company, take it. This is why job hopping is much more common now, not because of entitled youths, just because loyalty just isn't effective anymore. 2% raise at year 3 or 18% raise by going somewhere else. Gee, I wonder why I left that place. That you can't just walk into a company and walk out with a job. My dad and his friend walked into a factory in the early 80s and both left with a job. My dad still works for the same company to this day. He can't understand why I'm finding it so hard to find work now. That seems to be a common story. Either someone wants work to keep busy, or they got laid off. They try to get a job and realize how hard it is. This is one reason I wish more young people would vote. Too many people in office now are so out of touch because of their ages. There was one congressman who didn't believe that there were federal employees living paycheck to paycheck. How much people have been taken out of the equation in job searches? A lot of these online application portals are automated. It's not a person reviewing your application first. It's an algorithm scanning your resume and cover letter for key terms and assessing your responses to any additional questions in the application. Tell the computer what it wants to hear and you might get to the human review pile. But if you don't, it will reject you regardless of your qualifications. Which makes me to tears no end. I don't know what the computer wants to hear. And the keywords that the computer wants to hear were fed to it by 52-year-old Karen in HR who doesn't understand the demands of specialist roles in the heavy industries, excluding swaths of appropriate candidates. My dad was telling me how my friends must be really lazy if they haven't found Christmas break jobs. I tried to explain that we live in a college town area near a big city, and that all the Christmas work, what little there is to begin with, why hire seasonal employees when you already have enough staff, is already taken by October by all the college kids who already live in the area. Not only that, but trying to get to a job back home when you're cities or even states away is really hard. How do you show up for an interview if you're across the country? But he just didn't get it. Find a job every 2 years. At one of my last jobs, they hired a guy who lied on his resume and didn't know how to do anything design or civil related. He got terminated within a few months, and I found out that he was hired on making a little less than double what I made. It's honestly a joke. Companies refuse to pay their existing employees a competitive wage, so they all just deal with the merry-go-round expenses of turnover and hiring new people exponentially more than just keeping their existing employees happy. I wish loyalty was a value. I think it makes a work environment cancer when you have to walk into your boss's office with an offer in hand to receive any meaningful competitive raise. That you will not hear from a rejection, almost ever. And it's super difficult to get an interview whether you're in work or not. I've probably applied for a good couple hundred jobs in the past year or so. I received maybe 1 or 2 rejection emails and only got 3 interviews, one of which ended up being door-to-door sales. I never got a courtesy the interview didn't work out because of, or you didn't get the position because, not a single phone call or email. You'd think after all the hoops you jumped through and applications you filled out, you would get something. Nope. Really, really degrading. In my experience, the over 75 crowd frequently assumes any college degree will get you a great job. In addition, due to retirement, they are unaware of the current atmosphere of nasty competitive behavior, a lack of civility in the workplace, and employers not always giving appropriate compensation for expected duties. I have a PhD, and I was employed on the temporary contract that was renewed every month. If someone offered me a year position, I would cry for joy at such extravagant stability. A lot of the hiring process is done online, so the idea that you can just walk into an office and hand in a resume is outdated for many positions. There are also a lot more people in the job market who are highly educated. Having a master's degree now is like having a bachelor's degree in the 1960s. If you want to stand out from other applicants, it's no longer enough just to have a college degree. Switching jobs has become more common than ever before. Spending your whole career with a single company is no longer a realistic goal for many people. Most awkward job application I had was trying to apply to Aldi just out of school, getting a job in the meantime. Their site wasn't working. My gran asked how the application was going and said, "Can't really do it right now, the site is down." She dragged me down to the local Aldi to hand them a CV. They said when I handed them a CV to do it online. Gran said very loudly, "The site is down, can he give you this?" That 18-year-olds can't live off the types of jobs that are available to them. People keep asking me how long I'm going to let my 18-year-old live with me. They don't get that it's basically impossible for an 18-year-old to be on their own with a part-time minimum wage job. He helps with rents and bills, and honestly, I know people living with their parents in their late 20s, and they have good jobs, but housing and the cost of living are still out of reach, and it makes more sense for a lot of people. That entry-level jobs now require experience. I saw an ad for a local grocery store that required at least 1 year of produce experience. Entry-level jobs were entry-level jobs for the older generations. Now you have to have experience to get a job anywhere, which is a paradox. How can you get experience if every job requires experience? Depends. People with 4-year degrees will likely be very temporary. People without will probably need the work more and stick around. That it largely doesn't function like it did in their day. A lot of 50-somethings look down on 20-somethings because of how easy it is to get stuck. I know a guy in his 50s who's an engineer today. Never went to school or got any certs or degrees. He started as a teen janitor for their firm and worked really hard every day. His work ethic was noticed, and he eventually moved up and up and up in the company until he was an engineer. They taught him everything about the trade, based on his work ethic and interest alone. That just simply doesn't happen today. People do that nowadays, and they might land in middle management working for the McDonald's Corporation. Maybe. I don't know. It seems that the work really hard in an entry-level job to get promotions that one day become a career world is over in this country. But none of the older folks really see that and just tell you you're making excuses. Every generation sees this thing about the one that came before it, but it really is a lot harder to get by today. In my experience, job hopping has been the only way to secure advancements. You cannot go and check in on your application, aka contact them about the job after submitting an application. Most places will mark you as a do not hire because of this, saying that it makes you impatient and desperate. Source: I've seen a couple of people who work in hiring say that this is a policy that they've been told to uphold, including my own supervisor. That wearing a suit doesn't automatically get you a job. The first job I ever applied for was for some carpet company. My mum wholeheartedly believed that if I gave the store manager my CV while looking smart, it would impress him. I went in the place feeling stupid. The guy took my CV and said, "Thanks." My mum asked me how it went, and I told her. She was baffled that I wasn't hired on the spot. That is so bizarrely out of touch. I reviewed 1,000 resumes a month, and after 1 year we had hired 10 people. Competition can be insane. I worked at a very successful game developer years ago. Applied at their GDC booth and noticed the 3 resume piles. Unlabeled, of course. One was huge, which was the obvious no's. Second pile was the maybe, at about 2/3 height of the no pile. The third was call back, with about 10 resumes, and a secret pile of the talk to now people. I got a red star put on mine and put into the secret pile. Was talked to in about 10 minutes. After 6 interviews, 4 Skype, 2 in person, over 9 months, I was hired. Now, since I was one of the first studio artist hires, part of my job was to find other artists for the team. HQ HR filtered out the obvious no resumes before they got to us, which was whittled down to 1,000 per month. Roughly 50 resumes and portfolios per day to go through. And after a year, we hired 10 people. Out of 12,000 resumes, 10 people. I know game development is very competitive, but this was insane. My previous life was so vastly different to this. I wanted to do sound design for racing games or some form of automotive media. I got my BA in sound design but took a Radio Shack job to pay the bills while I tried to figure out how to get a job I wanted. Ended up starting a blog about car media since no one was really doing that. I wrote some game reviews and networked in some game audio communities, but being based in Minneapolis wasn't helping. Anyway, after a few months and a trip to GDC, I started doing interviews on my blog with people who do the kinds of jobs I want. The blog sort of became a facade, I guess, but it put me in direct contact with people I wanted to know. It got pretty successful over like 6 months, and I was interviewing ESPN production guys and the dev teams from Codemasters and Turn 10. I even did a Kickstarter to make my own car recordings, and I co-authored a GDC presentation. Anyway, one day I got an email from one of the folks at Turn 10 I interviewed saying they needed someone, and I was the first on the list because of my blog work. Loved that job for a multitude of reasons, but contract gigs aren't for me, I guess, so it's a previous life now. They think it looks bad to change jobs too often. I've had 3 jobs in the past year. One was finishing up a temporary contract, one was awful and not as described, so I left my current job. I'm nearly 30 and have had a job since I was 16, starting part-time in retail for my teens. I've had a total of 10 jobs. My parents have had less than that combined over 40 years. Places either don't offer as many permanent contracts as they used to, or you quickly stagnate as development opportunities and salary increases are far and few between. To move up, I've had to change jobs. Not once within a team or department have I or any of my colleagues ever just been promoted or had an out-of-the-ordinary okay increase. You've got to jump around these days. Your loyalty to a company or organization usually gets you jack, and I generally, think anyone under 50 now, that is those still working and not just counting the clock to retirement, gets it. What bothers me about the whole job hopper thing is that the threshold is always so arbitrary. Some people say 6 months, some people say 3 years. I also absolutely despise the idea that you should force yourself to work in a terrible toxic job that is doing nothing for you but padding your CV just to appease some mythical recruiter. My mom seems to think that I'll easily get a job right out of college with just a bachelor's degree because I'm extremely intelligent, so employers will just be begging for me. Like sis hasn't been job searching in probably 30 years and thinks that I, with a measly bachelor's, no connections and no experience, will easily get a job and be able to move out right after graduation. The older generation has no idea how hard it is to even get a decent job at a minimum wage, let alone in the professional market. This one I can't entirely agree with. I'm 23 with an associate's in industrial automation and I landed a pretty sweet job. It depends on the field and what the competition is like and a whole bunch of other things.